Hey guys, this is Bryan from Fantasy Labs. Thanks for watching. This is the weekly video in which I go through the Thursday ownership from FanDuel from the FanDuel Thursday lineups. And again, this is from DFS Report, as always, dfsreport.com. And they do this. They enter a lineup into the $2 Thursday NFL Snap, which has about 172,000 entries. So again, big sample size. So it's probably pretty representative. I think this week's going to be a little interesting because I think this might be the week where Thursday is probably least correlated to Sunday, and I'll tell you why. But I think it's still useful to go through, even if it's just to tell you why that I don't think it may be as useful. So starting out, again, this first box is just people who played on Thursday. Devontae Freeman was crazy high owned, 56% almost, which is going to be important later. We'll get to. So going down to quarterbacks, Tom Brady obviously is the play in cash, and people think he's going to go off. The over/under is 55 right now against the Colts. So if you aren't aware, Tom Brady and all that Deflategate stuff started when they played the Colts in the playoffs last season. So Tom Brady obviously is a fiery guy, and I assume that he's probably going to be up for this game, and they're projected to score over 30 points by Vegas. And obviously Brady and probably Edelman and Gronk are going to be a big part of that. So I would expect him to be very high owned, probably around that number, maybe even a little more. But probably the main cash guy. There's rumors that Deion Lewis might be out for this game, which makes the Garrett Blunt a good play, but also probably gives a boost to Tom Brady in the passing game as well. So that might increase it as well. Andy Dalton's the only guy over 10% as well. There's usually only one, but we have two. He's just been a solid. He's been a top 5 guy, and his salary is just taking a little bit to catch up, and it's still pretty low. So I think he's a very safe cash option, and I don't mind him in tournaments, especially if you pair him with AJ or Eifert, who is just an elite, turned into kind of a mini Gronk. We thought Kelsey was going to do that this season. It's kind of been Eifert. So going down, Aaron Rodgers is kind of interesting. He's only 5.3% owned, despite being in a really good spot. He's at home. We know what his splits are at home, so that's always good. Blake Bortles is a guy I love. He's been kind of coming on lately. I'm surprised he's creeping up, so maybe people are noticing. But that's interesting. Brian Hoyer is another guy too, who's a little interesting. Hopkins splits. If you look at the splits with him and Mallett, he's a beast when it's Hoyer's the quarterback, and he's not very good. Mallett just can't give him the ball. But when Hoyer's in the game, Hopkins is targeted like crazy, and they find each other a lot. So the fact that Hoyer's getting the full start and everything is a good sign for Hopkins, and I think that they'll probably be a pretty good play this weekend. Going down, Colin Kaepernick's a little interesting. He's going against who is he going against? He went against the Giants and had a great game. He's going against the Lions, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. And they are. He is minimum priced on DraftKings, and we've kind of seen what Kaepernick can do. He had that 30-point game in week 1, and he had over 20 last week. And at minimum price, and his number 1 wide receiver, who also had a really good game last week, over 100 yards and touchdown, Anquan Bolden, is at 4,300. So if you're kind of looking for a contrarian cheap stack on DraftKings, I think that that Kaepernick and Bolden could be that for you. The really, really interesting one for me is Andrew Luck. I think he's going to be super low owned. It looks like he's going to play, and people are going to fade him like crazy. Number 1, because of his struggles this season so far, which may or may not be because of his injury, but also because of that game flow and the fact that people are just expecting the public is way on Brady and the other guys. So I think that people will fade the Colts entirely, thinking that the Patriots are just going to stomp them, and they might. But I think Luck, anytime you can get an elite talent at less than 1%, especially a guy like Luck, I think it's worth a couple lineups in a tournament. Quarterbacks are always better as underdogs, and they're, I think, 7.5 point underdogs right now. So if you can get him in this spot, pair him with TY. Maybe they go off at a low ownership percentage. That could put you in a really good spot in the tournament. EJ Manuel. No, thanks. Deion Lewis is the highest owned guy, but he's actually a little overpriced on DraftKings now, and he may not play. So this could actually work out not so great for FanDuel guys who thought he might play. He's questionable right now, so that's interesting. Chris Ivory is an interesting guy. I didn't think he would be this high owned, and I'm not 100% sure why. I guess they just think that the Jets are just going to run a lot. AP is a guy who's really going to be a safe cash play this week. I think that they're just going to run a ton, and I think that he has got a pretty high floor this weekend, so I'm not surprised there at all. Same with Forte. It looks like Martellus Bennett might be out, so if so, and if Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal are both out, Matt Forte is kind of the only guy there. So I think that he would get a ton of carries, and also Cutler would dump down to him a lot in the pass game. So I think that he would just get a ton of looks. Bell, Lacey, Foster. So it's kind of star-studded up here, as you would expect on most weeks, but it hasn't been. This week is. Lacey's a guy I love, especially on FanDuel. I'm curious to see what his ownership will be on DraftKings, because he's such a great value on FanDuel, but he's in such a great spot because they're heavy favorites at home, and Lacey's been struggling, and so his ownership is down, and his price is down a lot from where it was at the beginning of the season. So I think Lacey's in a good bounce back spot. It could be interesting. Charkandrick West is obviously one of the trendy plays because of Jamal Charles, but I'm not really on him at all. Lamar Miller is the interesting one to me, kind of towards the bottom of here. I think that he's in a really good spot. The new interim coach said that he was going to try to get Lamar Miller more involved in the offense and get him more carries. And his price is depressed to 4,300, I believe, on DraftKings. So he's in a really good spot in low ownership. So I think that probably, I don't know if I would go him in cash, but definitely in tournament lineups, I really like him there. So moving on to wide receivers, obviously Edelman we know is going to be crazy high owned, kind of all over the place, as he should be. He's always a bet for a ton of targets, ton of receptions. He's probably going to hit over 100 yards, maybe a touchdown, and just has an incredible safety. Hopkins is kind of the same deal with Hoyer, and he's going to get maybe even 15 to 20 targets, and they're just going to feature him like crazy. So these are obviously your two safest wide receivers in the slate, and kind of have been all year. So no surprise that they're way up there. I really like Calvin Johnson. I don't know if Golden Tate is up here, but those are guys that I'm really targeting in tournaments. Their ownership's decreased, and if you've looked at an article I did, it's called Taser, and kind of just goes over how lucky players are and whether we would expect regression. In the Lions, wide receivers have actually got a ton of targets but haven't got into the end zone, and we would expect some regression there. So I think if Stafford plays, Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate are actually in pretty good spots. Randall Cobb is interesting because we usually find him up here, especially at home, as heavy favorites, especially when you're targeting Rodgers, you pair him with Cobb, but he's not. So that's interesting that he's low. So that's something I would look at. And again, if you are going to go with the Andrew Luck route and try to get people off guard and get him at a low ownership, then obviously I would pair him with either TY or Moncrief. Tight end, so this is really interesting. Antonio Gates is obviously the highest by far. He's 34.9% owned, much higher than Gronk, who we kind of expected to be the highest owned because of that line, but he wasn't. And I was actually talking to Bill, who's one of the writers at Fantasy Labs, and he proposed an idea of perhaps that people in the Thursday lineups were so on Devonta Freeman, in which they were. We saw that he was at 56%, and maybe it put him in a situation where they had to choose between Devonta and Gronk in that position, because they're kind of at similar salaries, and they decided to go to the safer route with Freeman, and therefore drop salaries to Antonio Gates, who is about 2,000 or 3,000 less. But he questioned whether on DraftKings on Sunday, because Freeman's not in the slate, both on FanDuel and DraftKings. If Gronk is going to shoot up, because you don't have the issue of Devontae Freeman in the slates, and you can pair one of the top running backs with the cheaper running back, be it Lamar Miller, or if you want to go the Chark-Andrew Quest, or Shane Vereen, or whoever it may be, you could do that and get Gronk in your lineup. So I think that this may not be super indicative of Sunday. That's my worry. If it is, then I think that this number is silly for Gronk, and he should be way up there. But I don't know. This is something I'm going to monitor on Monday. I don't really have an answer, but it's something interesting to think about for sure. Denver is always a great play on defense. They're probably the best defense in the NFL. So no doubt that they are the highest owned. My favorite probably is the Bengals defense at 4.8% here. They are going against the Bills and EJ Manuel. Apparently LaShawn McCoy might play, but we don't know which receiver is going to play. They're just going to stack the box. They're in a lead D as well. And Cincinnati at 5% against the Bengals are against the Bills with EJ Manuel turning the ball over a lot is definitely a spot that I want to be in. So that one sticks out to me as my favorite play. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are, and good luck in week 6.